The second type of variables that we'll be looking at is tfVars. With Terraform Variables, you can create a .tfVars file where you store the actual values of all your Terraform variables. Now, this means that if you have an AMI ID that you want to be changing, or you have an instance type that you want to be changing, or you have an EC2 tag name that you want to vary, or you have a security group that you want to vary, you can store the values, the actual values of these attributes in a Terraform vars file. So you create your variable file and then you store all the values in a values.terraform vars. So you're still making use of variables, but the values are stored in a terraform.var file. So for us to do that, let's create a new folder for Terraform variables. So let's create a new folder for the 4. We call it variables. We are using Terraform vars. Now, once you create the folder, you create the first file, which is our main.terraform as usual. You create the second file, which is our provider.terraform, and then you create the next file, which is our variable.terraform. Now, once you create this, we can still go back to our folder 3 and we copy all of our main and we maintain the same main file here. You copy it, you come to folder 4 and you paste the var.terraform. You paste the main. So we have all our values. We maintain the main values. We go to folder 3. You copy the provider configurations. You copy that. You come back to folder 3 in the variables. In the provider section, you paste. And then now we want to understand how Terraform variables work. You open the variables.terraform and we see declare our variables. So below are the list of variables for resource creation. Now, what's the first variable? We create a variable. Let's create the variable AMI underscore ID for the AMI value, for the AMI ID. And now with Terraform vars, you do not specify any value. The next variable we have is variable instance type. Instance type. Again, you do not specify any value because we want to specify those values using our Terraform vars. The last value we have is variable tag name, EC2 tag, and then you do not specify any value. Remember, all these variables, the AMI ID, the instance type, all these variables are being called here. If you see in our main.terraform, we have a variable AMI ID, and if you come to our vars.terraform, you still have that same variable AMI ID. Again, if you come to our main.terraform, you see a variable instance type. You come to our var.terraform, you see instance type. And then if you come back to our main.terraform, you see a variable EC2 tag. If you come to our variable.terraform file, you see the EC2 tag. So we have created these 3 variables. Now take note, these variables do not yet have values. Now, how can we pass these values or the values of these variables to our variables? We now create a folder within the Terraform variables folder. So you now create a folder here and you call this folder variables folder. Variables means that you want to store all the variables that you'll be using in the project repository in these variables. And once you create a variables folder, the first file which you're creating now is the file that will have all the actual values of your resources. So the values of the AMI IDs, instance type, EC2 tags, subnets, VPC IDs, and all those values that you actually want to have in your environment. You store those values now in your values.terraform vars file. So we create the file values.terraform vars. Once you create a values.terraform file, this is where you specify the actual values of the variables. So we can comment specify the values of the variables created. Now, what was the first variable we had? We had a variable for the AMI ID. What is the value of that AMI ID? You specify the value. We had a variable for the instance type. What's the value for that variable? You specify the value. And then we have a variable for the EC2 tag. And what was the value for that variable? You specify the variable. Now, coming back to file 3, if you look at our variables file here, we specified all those values as default. Remember the previous video we were looking at default variables and we specified the value of our variables as default. But with Terraform Vars in folder 4, you will see that we specify the values of our variables using .terraform vars. So .terraform vars helps you to store values, and once you store those values in the .terraform vars, you can now call those values using your variables file. So let's go back to folder 3 and copy the value of our variables. So for the instance AMI ID, we copy the AMI ID value, and then we come to our Terraform vars and we paste. We come to our Terraform vars and we paste. We come back to our folder 3, we copy the instance type, copy it. We come back to our Terraform vars and the instance type here we paste, which is t2.micro, and then the instance tag was test instance, and we maintain this value. So now once you do this in folder 4, we now have variables, the variable AMI ID, instance type, and EC2 tag that have been stored in a Terraform vars. We now have the values of the variable AMI ID, the variable instance type, the variable EC2 tag that have been stored in the values.terraform file. So once you do this, you are now making reference to these values in your resource creation. So once you come to your resource, you see we have var.amid, and this variable has been defined in our variables file. And where is the actual value of the variable stored in our values.terraform file? So you can actually use values, or you can actually use Terraform vars to store your values, where you just automatically put the exact values and then you call those values in your variables.terraform file. So for you to test if your configuration is complete, you come again, you open our terminal, we do a new terminal, you cd into folder 4, which is where we are working. You do an ls. You now see we have a variables folder which contains our values. If you cd into the variables folder and you do an ls, you see our Terraform vars. If you cut this file, you actually see the Terraform vars that we specified. We specified our instance type, we specified our instance tag, and the AMI ID. So all of these are the values that are in our values.terraform file. So let's cd back into the in the parent directory. Let's clear. We do an ls. We now have main.terraform, provider.terraform, and variables.terraform. So let's do terraform init. So once terraform init is complete, let's clear. We do terraform plan. I'm now asking you to input the value of your AMI ID, and you come to your value, and once you come to your values.terraform, you just copy this and you paste. They're asking you for the EC2 tag, so we want to tag our EC2 instance, test instance, and then they're asking you for the value of the instance type t2.micro. So once you provide those values which you specified, you will now be able to provision those resources. So once you have your values stored in your vars.terraform file, every time you want to apply, Terraform actually give you the possibility to input those values that correspond to values that you stored in your terraform.vars file. So let's do Terraform apply, and then we try to apply with different values. So let me put a different string here. Enter the value, the tag test instance, and then enter the the tag, the instance type T2 micro. Once you run the command terraform apply and you do that, it will tell you 1 to add, 0 to change, and this to ask, do you want to apply? You say yes. And once you specify yes, you will now see an error. We gave the wrong instance type, and now you tell you invalid instance AMI ID. So we specify a particular value in our values.terraform file, but when we're creating the resource, we gave a different value. So Terraform cannot apply given that you've given wrong values. So let's run a Terraform apply again, and then we specify the right values to create our resources. So let's do Terraform apply again. They'll ask for the instance AMI ID. We now copy the value that we stored in our values.terraform file, copy the value, and we paste. The instance tag was the test instance, and then now the instance type is a t2.micro, and then you hit enter. They'll ask, do you want to create these resources? I take yes. And once you do that, you now see the test instance is creating. If you come to our EC console and we refresh, you now see a new instance, test instance that has been created. And if you come back to your VS Code, you will now see the resource one has been created because we gave the right value that we specified in our values.terraform file when we are applying that resource. And that is how you can use vars.terraform to specify values or to input values when you're creating your variables for your resources in Terraform. Once that is complete, let's do Terraform destroy to delete that instance. So we do Terraform destroy, and then they'll ask you the AMI that you want to destroy. So you must input these values that you specified in your var.terraform file. So you copy this, paste the instance that you want to destroy, the instance tag. So the test instance, and then the instance value was the t2.micro, the instance type t2.micro, and then you hit enter, and Terraform will destroy that instance. Once you destroy, the ask, do you want to destroy? You say yes, and then you see destroying the instance. So you give it some time to destroy. You come back to your console, and if you refresh, you will see that the instance is being terminated, or the instance is shutting down because you run Terraform destroy without you necessarily coming to your console to destroy that resource. If you come back to our EC2, you see instance still destroying, and then you have destroy complete resources one destroy. That means that instance is no longer existing. So that is how you can use Terraform Vars to specify values and variables in your Terraform files.